It was a chilly morning outside a small-town auto shop when a scruffy, tired-looking black man approached, clutching a cardboard sign that read, "Can I fix it for food?" The mechanics laughed, tossing greasy rags and jokes his way. To them, he was just another drifter, someone desperate enough to trade work for a sandwich. But as he quietly studied the broken-down race car in the corner, something in his eyes shifted. Precision, memory, mastery. Within moments, his hands moved like a man born for engines, not begging. They mocked him for what he'd become, never realizing who he once was. A legend who once ruled the racetrack. Before life stripped him of everything, Marcus "Lightning" Hayes had been a name whispered in awe across American racetracks. A black driver in a sport that rarely welcomed him, Marcus had carved his name through speed, skill, and sheer defiance. He wasn't just fast, he was fearless. Every race he entered became a statement, every victory a fight against prejudice that told him he didn't belong. But after a tragic accident took his wife and child, the fame that once fueled him turned to ash. The endorsements vanished, his team replaced him, and the world moved on, leaving him with only memories, grief, and trembling hands that once gripped the wheel like steel. Now, years later, he wandered from town to town, fixing old engines for spare change and leftovers. That morning he stopped outside Carter's Auto Works, a dusty garage where three young mechanics prided themselves on mocking anyone they thought was beneath them. Their laughter echoed through the open bay doors when they saw him, his torn coat, oil-stained fingers, and that cardboard sign that seemed to announce defeat. Marcus didn't argue or beg. He simply pointed to the half-assembled race car sitting near the wall, its engine open like a wound. "Looks like your timing belt's off by 2 teeth, he said softly. They smirked, tossing him a wrench just to watch him fail. But when he knelt beside that car, something shifted in the air. His movements were steady, deliberate, like a man who had done this thousands of times under brighter lights and louder crowds. As Marcus worked, the sound of metal against metal filled the garage. The young mechanics, Jake, Tyler, and Cody, watched with smirks, waiting for him to mess up. But the longer he worked, the quieter they became. His every move was precise, checking compression, aligning valves, adjusting spark plugs with the patience of a craftsman. His hands, though rough and scarred, moved with the fluid rhythm of someone who knew engines not by sight but by instinct. Jake leaned over, trying to hide his curiosity. "You really think you can fix a race car, old man?" he said, half laughing. Marcus didn't look up. "Machines talk," he murmured. "You just have to listen." When he turned the key, the engine coughed once, then roared to life. The same car the mechanics had struggled with for weeks now purred like new. The sound reverberated through the shop like thunder. The laughter stopped. Cody's jaw dropped. "How did you—" Marcus wiped his hands on his coat and said quietly, "Timing's everything." Frank Carter, the shop owner, had been watching from his office window. He stepped out, wiping his hands. "You've got some skill there, mister. You ever work in racing before?" Marcus hesitated, his eyes clouded with memories, cheers from grandstands, flashes of cameras, his car number 44 streaking down the track. "A lifetime ago," he murmured. Frank tilted his head, curious. He walked to the back and pulled down an old racing magazine used to decorate the wall. On the cover, faded but unmistakable, was a younger version of the same man standing before him, smiling beside a golden trophy. The headline read, "Marcus Lightning, Hayes makes history, the first black driver to win the Grand Tour Championship." The garage went still. Jake whispered, "No way. That's him?" Marcus looked up, caught off guard by the photo. His shoulders straightened slightly, as if remembering who he used to be. But then he sighed, eyes heavy with loss. "That was a long time ago," he said quietly. "Before I lost everything that mattered." Frank nodded slowly, realizing the weight behind those words. "Still," he said, "a man like you doesn't just forget how to drive." Outside, a small crowd began to gather, curious locals drawn by the sound of the roaring engine. When word spread that the old homeless man had fixed the car the pros couldn't, whispers started floating. Is that really Marcus Hayes? For the first time in years, Marcus didn't shrink from the attention. He stood beside the car, staring at his reflection in its gleaming hood. The man who had once been lost in grief now saw a flicker of his old self, the racer, the fighter, the legend. The next morning, Frank made a decision that would change everything. His garage had been sponsoring a small local race that weekend, the Hillside Speedway Charity Cup. Their driver had dropped out due to an injury, and Frank, half joking, turned to Marcus. You think you've still got it in you, Lightning? The old man chuckled softly. Only one way to find out. The mechanics exchanged glances. Jake, now humbled, offered Marcus his late father's old racing gloves. You'll need these more than I do, he said quietly. It was a gesture of respect, one that spoke louder than any apology. By afternoon, the small-town racetrack buzzed with excitement. Crowds gathered under the sun, unaware that one of the greatest racers of his time was stepping back onto the asphalt. Marcus approached the same car he had fixed, the one they had mocked him for touching, and climbed in. His fingers wrapped around the steering wheel like they were reuniting with an old friend. When the flag dropped, something inside him awakened. The world blurred into color and sound. The roar of the engine, the rush of wind, the pounding of his heart. It all came back. Every lap reignited pieces of the man he used to be. The crowd began to notice. The smooth turns, the daring overtakes, the impossible control of the car. Whispers turned into cheers, then chants, "Lightning! Lightning! Lightning!" By the final lap, Marcus was neck and neck with the lead car. He leaned forward, eyes focused, and took the inside line with the kind of precision only a true legend could manage. The finish line flashed beneath him first. The crowd erupted. For a long moment, Marcus just sat there, hands trembling, eyes wet, not from fear, but from release. Years of pain, shame, and silence broke open all at once. When he finally stepped out of the car, the same people who once mocked him now stood in awe. Cameras flashed, reporters ran forward, but Marcus didn't smile for the fame. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "I fixed it, baby, just like I promised." When the dust settled, the air around the track carried more than just the echo of engines. It carried redemption. Reporters swarmed Frank's garage the next morning, eager to confirm the impossible, that the homeless man who'd fixed a broken car for food was indeed Marcus Lightning Hayes, the forgotten racing legend. But Marcus didn't seek the spotlight. He refused interviews, declined offers, and stayed mostly quiet. "I didn't come back to be famous," he said softly to Frank. "I just wanted to remember who I was before I gave up." The town, however, remembered for him. The same mechanics who had laughed at him now followed him like students. Marcus taught them not just about engines, but about respect, humility, and second chances. He showed them how to listen, not just to machines, but to people. Soon after, a foundation reached out, offering him a role mentoring young, underprivileged racers, especially black youth who dreamed of making it in a sport that rarely gave them a fair start. Marcus hesitated at first, but when he saw a young boy staring at him with the same hunger and hope he once had, he said, he nodded. "Let's build something that lasts." Months later, the garage where he'd once begged for food bore a new sign: Lightning Performance Youth Racing Academy. The same men who had mocked him now wore uniforms with his name stitched on their sleeves. On opening day, Marcus stood in front of a small crowd. His clothes were still simple, his hands still stained with oil, but his eyes burned bright again. "Don't let the world tell you what you're worth," he said. "Sometimes they'll only see the dirt, but if you keep working, the shine always finds its way back." The audience erupted in applause. Yet Marcus only smiled faintly and looked toward the horizon, the same way he used to before every race. Because some victories aren't measured by trophies or fame. They're measured by how many times you rise after being broken,